Howdo! The Spokeshave. The best tool you've ever used, or the most infuriating? Let's see if we can make it the former. Hi, I'm Chris. Welcome to King Bespoke Creations on this Technique Tuesday, and this new series that I've started with How Can I Help You? This is where I'm answering questions from people that reply to my mailing list. If you're not on my mailing list, click the link in the description. So Oliver replied to one of my emails asking about Spokeshaves, saying that he's finding them tricky to use. They don't just glide through the wood maybe as he was expecting it to do. So what's going wrong? Is it the Spokeshave? Is it the technique? Maybe it's a little bit of both. Is that a common problem you found? The Spokeshave bouncing, giving ripples and nasty cuts all the way along the wood. What's going on? So let's pull this apart and see what we've got. We unscrew this cap lever, bit of dust behind there, and then we have a blade, and that's pretty much it. So a lot of these Spokeshaves, the 151, have these adjuster screws on them which make adjusting a lot easier. Some of them are tap adjustments, which makes it a little bit trickier, but everything should still work in the same way. So one of the first things is just to make sure that your blade is sharp, which this isn't, like, at all. So if you've got a blunt blade, it's just never going to work cleanly. It's always going to want to dig in or bounce off the top, catch extra bits of grain and do nasty things. Also, the angle is a little bit more important on a Spokeshave than it is on a hand plane. Now both of these work the same way. The difference is the flat edge on the bottom of a Spokeshave is a lot smaller. So as you work it, you're more likely to tilt sideways fractionally, which changes the angle of your cutting blade, whereas a plane will just bog on flat. So the angle on here is really important. Now you don't want any steeper than about 25 degrees for the main part of this bevel, and then you can go a little bit further just to sharpen up that edge. Can you see on here, even on this blunt one, how there's a shiny section right on the very edge and the rest of it is pretty dull? So you just keep the bulk of that bevel at 25 degrees and then just sharpen that edge off. So just a few pulls on this is all it's going to take. So once you've got a nice sharp edge on there, make sure we put the blade in bevel down, not bevel up. Okay, so we slide it into there and then we can locate in these extra little sections on the adjusters here. So this cap iron on here is also working as the chip breaker. So again, you need to make sure you've got a really flat leading edge along there. Not sharp, but definitely flat. Now what a lot of people try to do is to have this screw too far in, or even screw the cap iron down with this screw. That's not what this is for. This is a pivot point. It's the fulcrum. So we tighten up with this, which pulls against this, which folds that leading edge down, pinning in the front of the blade. So then when we tighten this up, we can nip that up quite tight, and this pushes this end up, levering on that, pushing this end down and flat. So the next big reason for a chatter or a bounce is because the blade's not set correctly. Sometimes we just go in and set it up and start hogging, and it's trying to take off too much in one go. So back the blade out until it's doing absolutely nothing, and then start turning these in. Now this is important, that these adjustment blades aren't set for pulling it out for the correct distance, because you can actually see there's a lot of play in there. So they need to be pushed up for tightening in, otherwise the blade could bounce out. So we turn each side just a little bit. Oh, that's starting to get some dust in the middle of there. So one of the ways I like to work on setting it up is to go on a corner, so you know it's only going to take a really fine cut, and if I go from one side to another, I know whether it's taking off sections at one end of the blade or the other. So notice we have two adjustments, it's not just one. So you can see there, I'm taking off shavings from this side but not from that side, so there's nothing there, but it's taking it off from there. So I know then I could tighten that side up a little bit, and it takes it from there, and it takes it from there. Now, a common practice is to actually offset this, which is why we have two. So you can work on a shallow side that takes off a whisper, and you can tighten the other side up to take a slightly bigger chunk off. That way you can have total control over whether you want a tiny little bit taken off or you can take a bigger chunk off without having to adjust the blade. Very common practice. So once that you know you've taken a small section, we've set the blade to take a small amount, that should then work nicely. And it takes off a nice shaving. To make that even slicker, we can skew the blade. That will take off an even finer amount, and if the wood's a little bit chattery because the wood fibres itself aren't very great, slanting it will make it easier. It slices through the wood better. Super thin, super fine, and this finish is like glass. Now, one more thing you can do is have a rag in a can. This is a Paul Sellers special and it's absolutely genius. Planes, spoke shaves, anything where you have the metal surface running along the wood, this sorts out everything. This completely transforms the tool and instantly works slicker, smoother, easier, less effort. We should never need to bulldog any of these tools. So by giving that a bit of a wipe, it reduces the friction and gives you a cleaner cut. So there we go. By setting up the spoke shave correctly, it improves your technique straight away. If you're finding that you're really having to shove this through the wood, it means that the plane isn't set up correctly. Or maybe you're working against the grain of the wood. If that's happening, try turning it the other way. These work in both directions, same as a hand plane. A lot of people like to push, but you could just as easily pull, and it works just exactly the same. It makes no difference. A lot of people say, should I push or should I pull? Both, depending on which way the grain's working and whether you want to move or not. I hope you find this useful, and if you've got a spoke shave in your shed that you haven't used for ages because you didn't like it because it didn't work very well, go and pick it up, give it a fettle, and see if you can fall in love with it all over again. Make sure you give us a thumbs up if you thought any of this information was useful, subscribe and sign up for the mailing list if you fancy posting me a question. Until next time, sharpen your tools and I'll see you soon. God bless.